There's a quite a big difference between Black Lives Matter riot like collateral damage and trying to take over the fucking country. What the fuck is this? This is like one of the most douchebag guys that has popped out from the right. This is technically a copy of Ben Shapiro, but instead of being Jewish, this is Christian. Like, that's the best way to describe. He has every single one of his like takes are the same as Ben Shapiro, but the only difference is Ben Shapiro is wearing a yarmulke and this guy isn't.
Yesterday was a big day for performatively emotional displays by henpecked men. During the January 6th hearing, one man after another took turns bawling his eyes out, weeping openly and without shame. The most grotesque and nauseating spectacles came, as always, from the politicians. Here is Representative Adam Schiff getting choked up for unclear reasons.
We deem elections illegitimate merely because they didn't go our way, rather than trying to do better the next time. God help us. And if we're so driven by bigotry and hate that we attack our fellow citizens as traitors, if they're born in another country or they don't look like us, and God help us. And Adam, I didn't expect this would be quite so emotional either, but it must be an Adam thing today. But I'm so grateful to all of you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
He's got to work on his acting a little bit. I appreciate the timing. So he timed his emotional breakdown for...
Okay. I'm pretty sure Matt Walsh made a video about Jordan Peterson's breakdown. Let's go back a little. There we go. I'm not gonna watch these videos, but long story short, Matt Walsh actually applaud Jordan Peterson for showing emotion. And now, because it's on the other side of the political spectrum, he's making fun of it.
When he mentioned bigotry, no, that's when he's, no, we have to be nicer to people who don't look like us.
Like, this is what you call a hypocrite. Like, you can't applaud Jordan Peterson for showing emotions. I think any showing of emotions, especially if there's cameras and like a lot of people seeing what you do, like you're a public figure, it's kind of brave because of jackasses like this guy that believe that men shouldn't cry.
Bigotry is so upsetting to me. So he timed it well, but the acting needs a little bit of work. He wasn't the only Adam to carry on this way. Adam Kinzinger, a Republican, sobbed even louder. It was an inspiring moment of bipartisan emasculation. Let's watch that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to my colleagues on the committee. Thank you to our witnesses. I never expected today to be quite as emotional for me as it has been. I've talked to a number of you and gotten to know you. I think it's important to tell you right now that you guys may like individually feel a little broken. You guys all talk about the effects you have to deal with, and you talk about the impact of that day. But you guys won. You guys held. Democracies are not defined by our bad days.
Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional too. A little misty-eyed. Now, it goes without saying that neither of these men have shed any tears, as we discussed earlier, for any of the victims of any of the horrific BLM riots last year. Police officers were bashed over the head with bricks, beat, attacked, berated. This is all on video. Their precincts were burned to the ground to retire.
I think this guy is comparing two things. The other one is a wooden spoon, and the other one is an M16 rifle. Like, Black Lives Matter protests and if there's been injuries or even deaths, that's horrible. But the January 6th was attempt coup. They tried to take over Capitol Hill, and it was perpetrated by the far right. Alex Jones was one of them, because they believed the fucking thing was rigged. There's a quite a big difference between Black Lives Matter riot like collateral damage and trying to take over the fucking country. And look at this asshat looking like that. He knows there's a difference, but again, this is just like Russell Brand. He knows what his audience wants. And his audience wants that he will say bad things about Black Lives Matter, bad things about feminism, bad things about men crying, good things about Trump, capitalism, God, Christianity, abortion bad. Remember to say that.
A police officer was murdered in cold blood and left for dead in the street. Neither of the crimes...
That hasn't happened. There has never been a police officer left out for dead. A little citation, please. I think that would have been a bit of a news if, like, they were left out to die, or when they're dead. I think that would be a bit of a news, considering how big of a hero the police officers are in the United States. I also think there would be asshats like this filming it live in the fucking scene.
Ever shed any tears for those officers. By the way, that should be a band name, the Crying Atoms. That's because their tears are fake and manipulative. Fake and manipulative tears from anyone are disgraceful, but from a man...
This guy has the burden of proof. Prove they are fake, that they are acting. Otherwise, you're just a populistic, lying conspiracy theorist, nothing else.
And even more so. Even leaving aside the rank dishonesty here, this is also part of a larger problem. A symptom of an endemic disease. The fact that grown men will now cry to get what they want, like my 8-year-old daughter, only shows...
Yeah. That's... Ah, that looks bad.
Shows, again, that masculinity is in a dire state in this culture. There was a time when that sort of display would have been considered embarrassing and weak.
Why? Why is it embarrassing and weak to cry for your beliefs? Aren't you a fucking Christian? You guys cry because you think an imaginary guy died thousands of years ago and came back to life. You cry when you take a piece of fucking bread and drink some wine because you believe it's the body of Christ and the blood of Christ. Like, isn't like crying because of your beliefs a normal thing for a Christian? Aren't you a Christian?
But now we're meant to take a man seriously when he cries in front of us. Even more seriously, if anything. I think this is wrong, to put it mildly. And I've said so many times. I reiterated this point on Twitter yesterday. This is what I wrote. Simply, I said, men should not cry in public. It is unmanly and dishonorable. Rare exceptions can be made to this rule, but we make far too many exceptions. And the exceptions are pretty obvious. A loved one dies, your child is born, your bride is walking down the aisle at your wedding. In the latter two cases, a dignified tear or two may be...
Jordan Peterson cried on TV, though, because he was talking about lonely men, but that's okay for some reason. He didn't list that there.
Acceptable, but please don't turn the faucet on. Okay, there's no reason to go overboard. Don't try to prove a point. Other exceptions can be imagined. We've talked about some of them before. Perhaps, for example, you're saying goodbye to your family before embarking on a 3-year voyage to Mars. Maybe you're watching the end of the movie Rudy. Aside from those rare occurrences, the point is that men should comport themselves with a certain level of stoicism and dignity, learning to control their emotions and projecting an image of strength, of someone who is composed and in control.
I think this guy is just insecure, and that's a common thing among Christians. Like, it requires a lot of strength to be able to show emotions and you pull your back together and finish what you're doing. Dave Grohl wasn't weak when Dave Grohl broke down after Taylor Hawkins died. And in the memorial concert after Taylor Hawkins died, the Foo Fighters drummer, and Dave Grohl broke down during a song because, well, it was basically, the song was about the struggles Taylor Hawkins had way back in the history of Foo Fighters. Dave Grohl wasn't weak. It wasn't a sign of weakness. He was actually showing the sign of strength by showing that he is human. He feels that his best friend has died. Because somebody shows emotions isn't a weakness. Except if you're a Christian, or Matt Walsh, apparently.
Yeah, it's possible to go overboard in that direction, becoming an emotionless robot entirely unaffected by suffering, your own or anyone else's. But there aren't very many men in our society who are at any risk of falling into that trap. The problem, in most cases, lies way at the other end of the spectrum. Men today are encouraged to put their emotions on display at all times, to be vulnerable, to be soft and feminine and gentle.
No, and no. No, they are not. Men are taught to act as they feel. If they feel that they need to show emotions, they can show their emotions. What men aren't taught, I hope, less and less, is to act like some fucking old man has decided men need to act hundreds or even thousands of years ago. The thought that this guy has, that the idea how a man should act, is based on old people, how they thought that men would act, which was taught by old people to them, which was taught to them, which was taught to them. It's somebody else's persona, not you. This guy believes that men should be socialism, which is kind of fucking funny, that's why I'm making this joke, that all men should be the same. No, we are individuals. We have individual emotion, we have individual strengths and weaknesses. All men shouldn't be the same. Men should be able to be themselves without some Christian YouTuber telling them to be the same as what he and other like old timers presume to be, like how a man should act. Be an individual, don't be a part of a group. I thought that's the capitalist dream. I thought that's like what the right wing wants. Apparently not, though.
Men are encouraged to be women, in other words.
No.
In fact, some of the responses to my tweet were pretty enlightening. Lots of people, of course, were scoffing at the opinion that I expressed, even though it's an opinion shared by most people in the world, whether they'll say it out loud or not. Most women naturally want a man who will comfort them when they cry. They don't want to be doing most of the comforting.
And again, if you're making a claim like this on a video on YouTube, some citation would be nice. Some peer-reviewed studies would be great. But of course, because he's talking to right-wingers, he doesn't need any studies because they believe what the fuck anybody says. You just need to be on their side, and they will believe every fucking thing you say.
I'm not a woman myself, so I will allow the ladies to correct me on this point. But I can't imagine that most single women are searching for the kind of man who will break down in tears at the slightest disappointment or setback. Few women, I'm guessing, dream of the sort of man who will come home from work, tears dripping down his cheeks, sobbing and saying, "I just had a really bad day. Hank at the office was super rude. I am so frustrated."
He's going to those caricatures, those like on the other end of the spectrum stereotypes. You know who is watching the video and probably in my chat that there is things in between the both ends. You don't need to be hyper emotional. You don't need to be a cold-hearted robot. There's this thing called the thing in between. Like, you can show emotions if you need to. You don't need to do that every day. The thing you need to remember, you don't need to do anything. You don't need to act a certain way because some people think you should act because of your what they think a person like you should act. You don't need to do that. You can do it. You can do whatever you want to.
I would also theorize that the typical woman wouldn't marry a man at all if she knew that he'd be the type to shake her awake in the middle of the night, teary-eyed and trembling and saying, I just heard a noise outside. Can you go out and check? I'm so scared.
Like, why? Why would you go outside if you heard a noise, though? That's like, I've never understood that. Like, the safest place for everyone is inside, so why the fuck would you go outside? That's like survival instinct.
Few women want men who are like this.
Citation, thank you. If you don't have, then shut the fuck up.
Few boys want to grow into men like this.
Citation also
And yet our
needed.
culture produces men like this.
If you make claims like this, you would think you need some studies to show, some citations of like experiments done to show that this is actually what young men are thinking, like young boys are thinking. But no, again, this guy doesn't need them because his audience is majority, like, well, thinking the same. We can go and watch the comment section. That's probably the closest one. The people who cried over January 6th are the same ones who mocked Jordan Peterson for crying. Oh, yeah. So this is the way. I make a claim that majority of his viewers are the ones that don't need any fucking proof. And we can just take a random one. We didn't realize politicians crying is the funniest thing I've ever seen. Matt, you're increasingly becoming one. Yeah. I was right. So this is the way to do. I claimed something and I proved it. I would hope a big YouTuber like Matt Walsh would do the same.
This may not be something that the average person desires, but it is the agenda all the same. An agenda shared by, for example, a woman named Rachel Barrow. She's not any great cultural force by any means, but she is a former sportscaster turned, it seems, into some kind of motivational speaker for students and young men. I know of her existence because she tweeted at me in response to my thoughts about men crying, and she said 2 words, shut up. Yep, I've got my sassy pants on today. We are changing the narrative on what masculinity means, despite what this guy says.
Men should not cry in public. It's unmanly and dishonorable. Well, no. It doesn't make you less of a man if you cry. So that claim is not true. And it's not dishonorable. Maybe to somebody else's eye, but they don't own the rights to what is honorable. It can't be honorable for your eyes or the ones you love, and that's the only honor that really matters. I don't give a fuck about what Matt Walsh thinks is honorable.
Now, again, this is not any kind of a person of any great importance, but there is something so apt about this. Here is a woman who likely doesn't represent the views of most women, we should know, but a woman all the same, telling me, a man, to shut up on the subject of masculinity and to defer to her expertise. She, not only a woman, but a person who uses the phrase sassy pants, has decided that she should be in charge.
Like, I don't understand. What's wrong with the word sassy pants? I think that's a fucking funny word. Like, this guy is actually a big crybaby. He's butthurt on everything. Trans rights, feminism, men crying, like a lot of things that doesn't involve him at all. And he's butthurt about that.
Of changing the narrative on masculinity. As for me, a man, a husband, a father of 4, I have to pipe down.
Oh yeah, I'm a man. I'm a husband of 2. A husband and a father of 2, not husband of 2. A father. father of two.
And allow her to dictate terms.
And I
Sadly,
agree with
many
the
men
lady.
have decided to obey these kinds of demands from these kinds of women. Our culture has indeed allowed women to take the lead, even to the extent of defining masculinity. We see this in our schools, in our churches, in Hollywood and media.
How the fuck do you see on your searches, like, the person you're worshipping is a long-haired hippie who wore a fucking women's dress. He cared for the weak. He loved everyone. He was basically the polar opposite of what right-wingers are.
We live in an increasingly feminine world.
No, we don't.
So ironically, men are once again reasserting their dominance by identifying as women and bringing everything full circle. It is a confused situation, to say the least.
That isn't happening, and again, no citation. People just believe this bullshit he's saying. He's reading a script.
Now,
he's actually reading a script somewhere here down on the left.
This confusion, as a way of clearing the fog a little bit, I'd like to offer a clarifying image of what masculinity is actually supposed to be and how it is supposed to act in the world. This is a story I've mentioned a couple of times on the show, but it's worth mentioning again in this situation. It comes from Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, his magnum opus about the Soviet labor camp system. In one of the volumes, volume 1, I believe, he recounts the story of a man who had been arrested on trumped-up charges and shipped off to prison. And when he was at prison, he was sentenced to death. But by the time the sentence had been handed down, his wife was already on a boat on the way to visit him. And so he begged the guards to delay his execution for a few days so that he could see his wife one last time. They agreed on the condition that he doesn't tell her about his impending execution. And he didn't. He was with her for 3 days, never mentioned it, never hinted at it. And once she left, he was taken immediately before the firing squad and shot. Now, that is stoicism and manliness beyond the capacity of most mere mortals, but...
No, that is cowardice. If you're going to die anyway, and you pretend... and if you're saying you love that woman, that's the most fucking cruel thing you can do to the woman. That you pretend that everything is fine, I'm getting out of here, even though you know you're gonna die in a couple of days. That's the most unmanly thing you can do. The manliest thing you could do is tell your woman that you're going to die and let's make this the best last time we meet ever. That's the most manly thing you could do. Not lie. Lying isn't manly. Lying is actually kind of opposite of manly.
It points us in the direction that we should be striving towards.
No.
We are meant as men to carry our burdens with dignity and not to expect everyone else, least of all the women in our lives, to lighten our loads by always sharing in them.
It's not lighting their loads. It's like taking to account people who you love. Like, if I was in a similar situation, I would definitely tell my wife that, I'm dying in 2 days. We have 6 hours. We better make the 6 hours the best 6 hours ever. And that would be 100 times more manly than me being a fucking coward and not saying anything. Because what could they do? The guards have already let me see my wife. I'm gonna die. I have nothing to lose. But my wife has all to gain from me opening my mouth.
That at least is one.
Don't take advices from this guy. Like, what the fuck? This guy technically just said that it's okay to lie to your loved one. No, not just technically. He blatantly said that that's the manly thing to do, is to lie to your loved ones.
One way to be a man.
Well, that's actually going straight like against Christianity, which is kind of fucking ironic that he would go against his own faith.
The other is Adam Schiff, weeping like a schoolgirl, using his tears to manipulate.
Why are you using schoolgirls as an example? Like, this is what like a lot of leftists are saying about weeping like a schoolgirl. I think that phrase is kind of outdated, though. I would say weeping like, I don't know, Donald Trump when he lost the elections and nobody would re-elect him. Even though he screamed rigged. Weeping like Tucker Carlson when he thought he was losing his job.
And exploit. You could choose that option if you want, but you have to sacrifice your dignity and your masculinity.
Nope.
And your self-respect in the process. As I mentioned yesterday, I tweeted that men should not cry in public because it's...
Because this guy is repeating himself quite a lot. And he's also saying a lot without saying anything, just like
dishonorable and unmanly. Though I allow for certain exceptions, which I have outlined in further detail in the past. Perhaps I should publish an official list, with an index and a glossary and a bibliography and everything, so that any man, if he's considering crying, can quickly consult the rulebook and find out if his upcoming sobbing fit meets the requirements.
Like, I don't understand how Matt Walsh think that he has any authority to say what's masculine and what's not. Again, he's just like basing his thought of masculinity to some old fuck who invented it. And nobody even knows where it came from. But it's not like... It's not set in stone. It can't be changed. It can't be shifted. And it has shifted. Because we don't need to go that far backwards in time. Like, we could just go 60 years backwards in time. And the thought of being masculine is to beat your wife. I think that's a good thing that we have, straight from that idea of being masculine. Also to beat everybody who disagrees with you. Or to beat your children. I think, masculinity has evolved throughout the years. So I think having a rule book what's masculine and what's not is, complete fucking dumb.
Is this going to be sanctioned crying or not? But that's a project for another day. For now, I can tell you that people have been very, very, very upset about this. Ironically, thousands of men have cried publicly over the fact that I said they shouldn't cry publicly.
I haven't cried. It doesn't make me sad. The only thing that makes me sad is that people listen to this guy. It doesn't want to make me cry. It just makes me sad that there is... How many subscribers? 1.76 million subscribers that this guy has that believe shit that this guy is saying. That makes me sad.
There have also been some unexpected voices chiming in.
That's over 1/5 of Finland,
including one of the guys from Blink-182, which was funny. And speaking of funny, there have been lots of responses like this from a guy named Andy Ostroy, who described himself as a filmmaker and a proud Democrat. He said, I cry often, and I'm more man than you'll ever be.
That's true.
Now, it's not often that you hear someone unironically use the phrase, I'm more man than you'll ever be. And you certainly don't hear it said right after the words, I cry often.
Again, the reason why that is more manly than this guy picking on people who cry is because admitting that you can show emotions publicly takes more strength than picking on little people. This is basically the school bully, and the other guy who is openly showing emotions is the guy being bullied. It takes more strength to stand up to bullies than to bully people. That's why he is more of a man than this bully will never be.
But these are the kinds of landmark occasions that Twitter has made possible, and we should be grateful for that. I should note that some of these crying men have made physical threats, including a guy named Ronnie Fafaro, some kind of musician. And he said, quote, I don't know who the F you are, but I don't like you at all. Actually, I'd love to punch you in your...
Show. Where's the tweet? Where's the threat? This means nothing. This is again, we've been talking about this previously. Right likes to make up shit to make them look like a victim, to even the playing field, because they know they are wrong and they know they look like a villain, so they need to level the playing field, so they make up shit like this. That they are being threatened. The next thing he's going to say is they have been threatening his family.
Stupid little face and make you cry, you little bitch boy. Toxic waste of space. Immediately after writing that, Ronnie deleted the tweet and blocked me. I'm going to punch you. Runs away crying. Now I have to.
And you didn't take a screen capture. Why? If you saw the tweet with an iPhone, it's two buttons at the same time.
Say I have never felt less threatened by physical threats.
Oh, you're such a fucking man. I've never felt less threatened by a physical threat. Oh, fuck yeah. You need to pound your chest a little bit more.
It's easy to mock and make fun of these people and to point at them and say, haha, you're crying.
You're doing that.
And frankly, it's a lot of fun. And we should do that.
Why?
But what I'd really like to respond to are the accusations leveled repeatedly at me over the past day or two. That I only say things like this, like it's dishonorable for men to cry in public because I'm trying to shock and offend. Someone actually called me a shock tweeter, which incidentally is how I describe myself on my resume. Shock tweeter. Is that true, though? Do I say these sorts of things merely to cause shock and outrage?
Partially, yeah, but probably.
The answer is yes. At least partly. The first reason that I say what I say is that it's true.
There is a difference between threat and just saying. Would like to punch someone to the face, yes. Am I going to punch? No. Yeah, that's like about the tweet the Figaro guy sent. The tweet. Because I still don't believe that's true. And that was just one. He was saying multiple. Where are the rest? Or did they also like vanish into thin air? Like everything else. Like all his arguments are just vanishing into thin air.
And it's always worth saying true things. But I am aware that a statement like the one I made about crying in public will provoke a reaction. I know that. I say it anyway, not in spite of the reaction it will cause, but yes, partly because of that reaction. The point is not simply to selfishly profit off of the outrage mob's anger, though that is one perk that I quite enjoy. The greater point is that most of the things I say, including the idea that men should usually refrain from crying in public, that's all that is really being said here. Usually, men should try not to cry in public. That's it. These are completely common sense, completely unobjectionable things. The kinds of things that if I had said at any other point in history, in front of almost any other audience, anywhere, people would have yawned and said, well, yeah, what's your point?
But that doesn't mean it's right, though. Like, that's a fucking dumb argument, isn't it? Like, we don't need to go that back again in a time machine. That saying hitting a woman is okay. If I go backwards 100 years, yeah, people would yawn and say, yeah, it is, and slap a woman at the same time they're saying it. It doesn't make it right. Like, that's one of the weirdest, like, arguments and trying to get a gotcha moment. I don't understand this guy. Why are people liking this?
It would have seemed utterly obvious to almost everyone who has ever lived. And yet now we're supposed to believe that these obvious common sense statements are not only wrong, but absurd, outrageous, insane. I have actually been accused of insanity, literal insanity, for saying that men shouldn't go around crying all the time. We can think of many other common sense statements that provoke this kind of reaction. A statement like, for example, men can't get pregnant. That will even shock people in medical school now. Or women are weaker than men. Plenty of other examples come to mind. It's not simply that the mob will careful. You're going to be browbeat into thinking, well, if everyone thinks that the idea is that offensive, I must be wrong. The more we should all say this. Last night, I don't know if you got a chance to watch it, but if you didn't get a chance, you should go find that segment somewhere and watch it because it was really important. I was brought on to talk about the issue of men crying, which has been a theme on this show this week, something I've dealt with repeatedly. And it's great that I'm always brought. If I'm doing a cable news hit, it's going to be the important issues. That's what they bring me on for. Abuela, men crying.
Okay, we're just fucking go around in the same fucking circle, so I'm gonna just skip this. He made a 21-minute video. I'm gonna make a 40-minute video about men crying, and he's actually wrong. And that's my point.